secured. We want to pass off the baton now to NBC's Chris Jansen, who picks up our coverage from here. I'm Alex Witt. Thanks for joining me the last couple hours. Now over to you, Chris. Dramatic pictures out of Iraq, the first visible signs that the Iraqi military just might not fight for Saddam. Good morning, I'm Chris Jansen. It is the top of the hour, 4 a.m. here on the East Coast, 1 a.m. on the West, and British troops appear to be facing some resistance as they push north. British Defense Minister Jeff Hoon says British forces have secured the Faw Peninsula, but are facing opposition at Qasr as they press north toward the Iraqi port of Basra. The Associated Press reports that 200 Iraqi soldiers have now surrendered to U.S. Marines. Secretary Donald Rumsfeld confirming on Thursday that the U.S. has been in touch with Iraqi forces, including members of Saddam's elite Republican Guard, over how to surrender without a fight. Pentagon officials say no hostile fire involved in the crash of a U.S. Marine helicopter like this one. It is a CH-46 Sea Knight. It went down in Kuwait, killing all 16 people aboard. 4 American and 12 British. The Sea Knight was assigned to the 1st Military Expeditionary Force. We will recap the latest headlines on the Iraq crisis for you every 15 minutes right here on MSNBC. You can also get the very latest anytime on the web. Go to iraq.msnbc.com for complete coverage, including in-depth analysis, slideshows, and video. You'll find it all at iraq.msnbc.com. We now want to focus on the U.S. troops on the move in southern Iraq, making the move toward Baghdad. Joining us by phone, NBC News producer Paul Nasser in southern Iraq. And Paul, give us an idea of what the last several hours have been like for you and the people you're with. Paul? Do we have Paul on the phone? All right, we do not have Paul. Let me give you an update on some of the other things that have been going on so far. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld has been saying that he is very hopeful that Saddam Hussein's government can be thrown without a huge attack. We have been waiting for this major advance, both in the sky and on this land, but so far that has not been materialized. In fact, in some quarters, what U.S. officials are saying that this is going as well or better than can be expected. Rumsfeld says Americans have indeed been communicating with the Iraqis. They are looking for the possibility of surrender of commanders. Now, the question still remains, what happened to Saddam Hussein? The first attack that occurred in Baghdad on a location believed to be occupied potentially both by Saddam Hussein and his 2 sons, who have high positions in the Iraqi government. Not known if indeed they were there and who might have survived, but they do believe that some top Iraqi leaders were there at the time. Now, let's go for the latest on what's been happening to Carl Rochelle. He is at the Pentagon post for us once again. And Carl, let's start by talking about the latest military maneuvers. What's been going on? Allied forces charging north through southern Iraq.
Allied forces charging north through southern Iraq, Chris, and apparently making good headway. One of the things that is very interesting is that the news reporting, David Bloom of NBC News and others who are reporting from the field are apparently ahead of the command structure here because they know more. We're walking across the hall and calling into Doha and Qatar and saying, what about these reports from our reporters in the field? Well, we don't have any information on that yet. So we are getting ahead of the curve, but you have seen the Iraqi soldiers surrendering. Now, I do have a little bit of fresh information that is confirmed. The U.S. Navy fired more Tomahawk cruise missiles into targets in Iraq last evening. They haven't revealed the names of the targets yet, but I can tell you that the Aegis-class destroyer John S. McCain and 2 Los Angeles-class submarines, the Columbia and the Providence, all fired Tomahawk cruise missiles into targets in Iraq last evening. We were told that there were reports of explosions in and around Baghdad and in and around Mosul. Perhaps they were the targets. We don't know that yet. We're trying to confirm exactly what the targets were and how many missiles were fired, but the Navy does continue to play a role in this, Chris.
And what is the level there of, I don't want to say concern that things are almost going too well, but what's the overall assessment of how things are going so far?
It appears from the reports we're receiving here at the Pentagon that the operation is going extremely well. Now, bear in mind that this is the early stages of the operation, And the Pentagon, the military planners, did expect a number of Iraqi soldiers to raise their hands and surrender. That was part of that campaign of leafleting that went on. More than 17 million leaflets dropped suggesting to Iraqi soldiers that if they put their weapons down, put their hands over their head and walked out, that they would not be harmed. And of course, that is the case. But these are the conscripts, these are the regular Army soldiers, not the supposedly sophisticated, hardened Republican guards who have been guarding the area in and around Baghdad. So it may not be as easy when it gets in there, but for now, and the only casualties to report so far on the coalition side are those who were killed in that crash of the C-9 helicopter, the CH-46 that crashed in Kuwait. That was not from hostile fire. It was an accident, either weather-related, mechanical-related, or pilot error. And you do know that the casualty figures have been revised downward. The U.S. military confirming that 4 Marines attached to the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, which is based in Camp Pendleton, California, were killed. The British revising the number of British soldiers down to 8 now. That makes a total of 12. And as far as I know at this point, Chris, those are the only casualties, certainly, that have been reported back to the Pentagon.
So Camp Pendleton, those 4 Americans, that's where they were out of?
That's where the unit is based.
What about on the Iraqi side?
On the Iraqi side, we are still trying to find out whether Saddam Hussein is dead or alive. Now, I will tell you that senior government sources tell me that emergency medical personnel were rolled into that bunker in Baghdad that was hit late Wednesday our time, early Thursday morning Baghdad time, by 3 dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles and a couple of F-17s dropping bunker bombs on that area. That they believe that Saddam Hussein, part of his family, and a lot of the senior military leadership of Iraq were in that bunker, but they are not sure at this point what injuries did take place. I am told that they are trying to determine, but that we should not take the fact that we have seen Saddam Hussein on television as proof that he is still alive. The senior government sources told me that he was expected to have taped a number of addresses, not unlike Osama bin Laden is believed to have done, taped addresses to be played after the attack started. And one of the keys to this, I am told, is he references the date, which he would have known because President George Bush gave him a deadline. He would have known what date to make these operative, but doesn't talk at all about the strikes on Baghdad and other parts of Iraq, or the attack by the coalition forces. So I'm told he may still be alive, he very well may, but don't take as a fact because you have seen him on TV that he's alive. They're still trying to determine that right now. Chris?
Well, tell us about the kinds of things they're doing to do that. We know there was a report yesterday they were still doing voice print analysis of that tape. Obviously, they have some other tapes to compare it to. What kinds of things are being done, both on the ground and in terms of technically, to try to establish finally whether or not that was Saddam and who else might have been there?
Well, one of the things they're doing, you mentioned, they're doing voice print analysis. They are doing comparative analysis of the tapes. One of the things that we were told is the appearance of Saddam Hussein. He normally appears without glasses, reading from a teleprompter, a sleek, almost television anchor type performance in front of the camera. In the tape that we saw of him that was played on Iraqi television, he is wearing glasses. He is reading from a steno pad. It is not a slick presentation at all. He seems to be sort of pausing and wearying his way through that. They are comparing that to see if that is part of what it is. And I would suggest to you something else. Probably the people who turned him up, if you will, in the beginning, who pointed out where he was to the U.S. government, may be the ones who are looking into to what happened there. One interesting point that was made to me by this source late yesterday is that even if he isn't dead, he has to be looking over his shoulder at this point, not trusting anyone in his entourage because he couldn't be sure who had given him up to the U.S. government. You know, he moved from place to place almost every night. Where he was kept secret. He did have doubles that we have seen in motorcades, although I was told not to place too much emphasis on the double situation, but he is known to be almost paranoid about where he is and where he is going to be. And this source said he has to be concerned now who he can trust because someone told the U.S. government where he was and where he was going to be for a considerable period of time Wednesday evening, all during the day Wednesday, because President Bush was actually briefed on this at about 4:30 on Wednesday afternoon. So the U.S. government knew for some time where he was and how long he was going to be there, Chris.
Thanks very much. NBC's Cara Rochelle at the Pentagon giving us the latest information now. Armored units, we are told, from the Army's 3rd Infantry Division and from the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force crossed into Iraq last night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. Iraqi time, noon Eastern time. Let's get the latest from the 1st Marine Expeditionary. NBC's Bob Arnott has been traveling with him. And Bob, what can you tell us about your movements over the last several hours?
Well, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force was the lead group for a very dramatic and bold opportunity, and that was to seize the oil fields and to seize the pipeline and the refineries in southern Iraq. We understand that a substantial number of these are under the control. They have large numbers of prisoners of war. There are also casualties. One key difference here is that they are fighting back. They have dug-in positions. They have a thing called a ZSU-23, which is a lethal anti-aircraft artillery gun that is hitting at U.S. forces. There are also AC-130 gunships. As you know, these are extremely lethal gunships. The Iraqis are actually firing back at them. One big mistake I think many of us have made since the last war is believing that just because a bunch of political prisoners were put at the front lines and surrendered means that all of the Republican Guard and the other Iraqi units will give up without a fight. It's just not true. In this particular part of southern Iraq, very, very intense firefights that go on to this minute. We left here last evening. We had Cobra gunships, a substantial number of those is sort of our lead force. We also had Harriers, F-18s, an entire what they call combat air stack above us. We were in a CH-46. Unfortunately, one of the CH-46s with us went down. We knew these men. We knew them well. We lived with them here for the last couple of weeks. One of the advantages of being in embed is you really get to know and like many of these individuals, and these were just wonderful men. I actually was in the comfort trailer and shaved and took a shower at the same time that the commander of this aircraft was in there. I had a great discussion with him about what their mission was. We saw 8 Royal Marines go on to the helo. We then, of course, saw the 4 American Marines go on as well. They left slightly before us. We understand that they went suddenly nose down. Their wingman said, pull up, pull up, pull up. They did attempt to pull up. They really sort of pancaked the helo into the ground. It skidded over a course of about 100 feet. Tremendous amount of ordnance on the airplane. Now, the plane itself only has 50 caliber submachine guns, but the commandos were loaded for bear. They had grenades and a number of different devices which exploded to the extent that nearby airplanes actually had their protective countermeasures go off because of the very, very bright light. We were the trap plane. This is the tactical recovery plane meant to go and pick up these men. We had a couple of paramedics on board. I had gone over with them how I might be able to help out as a physician. And we went to launch, and then we're told that everyone was dead and that there was no need for our mission. You know, this is very personal. These were wonderful men. It's been just a real honor to have been with them, a real privilege to be with them, and you know, we just can't express how sad we are to their families as they learn in these early morning hours that their loved ones are now dead.
Yeah, this is a devastating piece of news, clearly. Talk about the mood and how those troops who will have more work ahead to do, how they get themselves back in the mindset to carry on.
A very sharp change in mindset. When we went in, it was, you know, let's get this thing done so we can get home. The commander, we call him One Beer, that's his call sign, turned to me with a steely look after he learned that this airplane went down. He was the crew commander, the sort of mission commander, and he said, let's go and kick some ass. They are really, I wouldn't say angry. It's not retribution, but at this point, they really want to get in, and they want to fight, and they want to fight hard. Now, a lot of people talked about the flight conditions at the time. I can tell you firsthand what happened. We had a haze. You could see the moon through the haze, probably 2 to 3 miles visibility. Once the helo is lifted, it went down to between 1/4 and 1/2 mile visibility. Now, we all wear night vision goggles, and they do make day out of night. But when you have sand blowing, and it decreases the visibility to that amount, you have a complete whiteout. There's nothing you can see. There's no horizon. You can't see it. The phone lines or the power lines, which are all over southern Kuwait here or northern Kuwait, you really have no opportunity except to just look at your gauges and go quite quickly back to your gauges. It was a big surprise. I talked to the weather briefers here yesterday, and they made it very clear that there was 72 hours of good weather coming up. One of the key sort of concerns, though, is this. This mission, frankly, was planned for tonight, not last night. And with this attack in Baghdad on Saddam Hussein's headquarters, there's been sort of a makeshift change in plan. All of this moving up 24 hours, and that may have played a part because there's meant to be much better weather tonight. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Bob Arnott, with members of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, and it was the first expeditionary who that helicopter flew out of, the first both U.S. and British casualties there. All of this, of course, creating a lot of movement in terms of refugees, people fleeing Iraq over the border into Jordan. Let's go now to NBC's Mike Taibbi, who is at one of the refugee camps that is set up, for the very latest on how all of that is going. And what have you seen over the last several hours, Mike?
Hi, Chris. How are you? This is not the kind of tragedy that my colleague Bob Arnott was talking about, but this is hardship. As you mentioned, the war, having been underway now in its third day, has created at least the beginning of that stream that might turn into a flood of refugees coming across the border from Iraq into Jordan. This is one of the two camps that is set up. This is Camp B, Camp Bravo, and this is for third country nationals. That is to say, non-Iraqis living in Iraq who decided because of the war that they had to leave Iraq and head home. Most of them in this camp, some 300 or so, are Sudanese who are heading back to the Sudan. This morning we got here at daybreak, and it seemed like a fairly normal and hopeful morning, and the sun was out, kids were playing soccer, people were going to the latrines that were set up and preparing to leave for the next step of their journey, which is to get to Amman and then fly back to Sudan. There's a holdup on that. But there are also problems here. There's not enough information for the non-government organizations to decide what resources to put in place. This morning at 2 o'clock, when there were 4 buses filled with refugees who had been waiting, there weren't enough tents set up at that point for them to move in. They did move in. And as I say, when they woke up this morning, they did so to a fairly normal morning. We're going to talk now to Sebastian Carlier, who's with the International Red Cross. Sebastian, despite all those problems, and there always are problems in these circumstances, you think you have the capacity to handle whatever comes over the border a few miles away?
Sure. I mean, we've been accommodating those people for the past couple of days. As you said, we have some difficulties with putting tents and all because of the weather, but we have the capacity in the next couple of days to accommodate at least 5,000 people. And we have additional capacity as well in our warehouses in Amman for about 25,000 people. And this capacity, those relief items, can be trucked any day within 4 or 5 hours to the border area.
And if the unthinkable happens, which is to say that flood that everybody is afraid of, not just 25,000 or 50,000, but several 100,000 coming across the border, then what's in place? Is the humanitarian community prepared to deal with that?
We hope so. Yesterday, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has launched an international appeal calling on the nations to be able to accommodate up to 300,000 refugees in countries surrounding Iraq. So we are quite confident that the capacity to accommodate those people and to assist them will be reached at some point if needed.
All right, now Tony, I think, can change the shot a little bit and look behind us. Let's tell you what we have behind us. There's one tent here I know where they have been allowing some of the Sudanese nationals to make short phone calls home, but tell me what else we're seeing here.
So basically we see tents, we see tents for accommodation of the people. We see tents as well for tracing them to make sure that they can talk to their families and all. We see the buses then in the background, the empty buses that are waiting for the refugees to get in and to be brought to the airport so that they can go back to their own country. And then in the background again, we have some latrines and some water reservoir. And that's basically it.
And we spoke with the doctor and the nurse who were on scene. There's a tent that has coffee and or milk and other foodstuffs that they can go to whenever they need it as well. So the camps are very specifically organized in that way.
Sure. I mean, up till now, to tell you the truth and to be frank, it was somehow difficult to organize everything because we didn't know how many people we would accommodate and all. But now things are getting more quieter, and the situation is more stabilized, so we can start building real refugee camps with different sections, and so that everybody can be accommodated and assisted properly.
Stabilized at the minute. Thank you very much. Again, that's Sebastian Carlier. We should tell you that there have been some medical problems as well. This is always a situation where the old and the young are most quickly affected by problems. There was one heart attack by an adult male and 4 other people, 3 of them children, who were taken to the hospital with respiratory problems. The wind's been blowing, the dust has been thick, etc. All, when they go back to Amman for the journey home will be accompanied by medical personnel. But the situation is fluid, stable now, as Sebastian said, but that could change at any hour. Back to you, Chris.
Mike Taibbi at the Iraq-Jordanian border at a refugee camp there, where really they're just watching and waiting to see how many refugees may come in. Now, we want to focus on the U.S. troops who are on the move in southern Iraq. And let's go now to Paul Nasser. He is the NBC News producer who has been traveling with our correspondent David Bloom with the 3rd Infantry Division. Paul, good morning to you. Give us what information you can about your movements.
What I can tell you, Chris, is that around 8 o'clock, there was a salvo of surface-to-surface missiles that was launched that lit up the night sky, and we could also see cruise missiles flying above, ahead of us, heading northwards. And for the troop of the 3rd Infantry Division that we're with, and we essentially stayed quiet overnight until first thing this morning. There was some movement, some stirrings with Infantry Division that we're with, and since this morning we've been on the road. I cannot tell you how far we've traveled, and I cannot tell you where we are. But what I can tell you is that we are part of a convoy, and that we've been moving ever since this morning. And so we've been on the road here now for at least 3 hours or so.
Tell us how the adjustment is made to this. Obviously, these plans are changing all the time. We were talking just before to one of our other correspondents, and he was saying how their plans had been moved up for some certain maneuvers. How do you time it in terms of sleep, in terms of eating, so that the troops are at least at maximum ability as they can be when the time comes?
Well, I will tell you that the division of the 3rd Infantry Division, the section of the 3rd Infantry Division that we're with, were given specific orders to rest last night. They were specifically told rest because you have a very long couple of days ahead of you, and within minutes almost, everybody hunkered down and everybody laid down to get some rest. And that, all of these are calculations that are taken by planners, and as far as they need their troops to be fresh, they need them to be on top of their game, if you want, so whilst one division of the 3rd Infantry Division, one section of the 3rd Infantry Division might be quite active at any given moment, another one would be resting, and then that one would kick off while the other one rested. So we happen to be with a troop that rested overnight here and has been on the move now since this morning.
And when you say rested, were you resting while you were on the move?
No, we were resting completely stationary, very close to the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border, where we had moved to a couple of days ago, and there was nothing around us, but this really sort of almost lunar landscape. This desert here is unbelievably arid and very unforgiving, and there was nothing around us except for the section of the 3rd Infantry Division that we were with. And apart from the about 20 minutes to half an hour of surface-to-surface missiles and howitzers that were launched yesterday evening at around 8 o'clock, I would have defied anybody to tell us that military action had actually taken place.
Yeah, how much information are you getting there? And I'm wondering how much the troops are depending on you and David and coming to you and saying, what have you heard? What do you know?
Well, that's pretty interesting. And as far as yesterday morning, we were told by our about the missile strikes that took place in Baghdad, and the preliminary missile strikes, if you want. And the troops around us had no idea that had taken place, and we were the ones to have informed them of that. Having said that, they are pretty well informed. They do know what's going on. Between the army radio keeps them as up to date as possible, and these are guys that are interested because obviously their immediate future it depends on the events that are taking place right now.
And let's talk about how you keep it all together. Obviously, most of the food is MREs, meals ready to eat, but I'm guessing, for example, that those big tanks don't get great mileage. What about refueling and some of the other difficulties about being literally out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, the logistical aspect of this operation is truly, I mean, it is amazing. I mean, the 3rd Infantry Division consists of 20,000 men, hundreds of A1 Abrams tanks and Bradleys and Humvees, countless Humvees. And all of these need diesel to be able to run, and they have to be topped up every day. Secondly, we are in the middle of one of the most arid regions in the world, and yet, you know, people survive on water, so you have to provide these soldiers with, not just with water, but also with food, to be able to top up their MREs, to be able to, apart from food and nutrition, you need to top up any ammunition that they've used up should they go into conflict. All of this consists of a long train of logistics, which is a fundamental aspect of this conflict. And that is one that is constantly being it is a train that is constantly on the road, refueling, restocking, and refeeding each and every soldier, each and every tank, each and every Humvee.
And do you travel with equipment that carries the fuel and then you refuel when you need to, or how does that work?
Well, there are refueling tanks that carry, you know, an astronomical amount of diesel with them, and then they start the day completely full and they end it completely empty. And somebody then marries up with that tanker, refills it, and then it takes off again and does the same thing again the second day. So you know, the logistical aspect of this is very well catered for, because it's a fundamental aspect of how your war plans are carried out.
You know, we were talking before about, Paul, the idea of them coming to you for information, and obviously being out in the middle of the desert, it's not like there's an easy satellite uplink where they can be watching MSNBC, but how much information are they getting from their commanders, and how much pep talks, how many briefings, how many times are they sort of brought together and talked to, you know, obviously, first of all, for logistics, to be told what they're going to be doing next, but also just to keep the spirits up?
Well, I will tell you, in regards to their spirits first, their spirits were lifted in the last couple of days when the sense of something actually being done, either diplomatically or on the military front, some achievements being achieved. That by, I mean, you have to remember these men have been in the 3rd Infantry Division, especially, have been here out in this desert for 6 months. Training time and time again, and so the mere fact that something was happening buoyed their spirit, if you want. As far as them getting information, their most basic task is to be briefed on what their plan is, and for them to carry out that task. The second, only second after that comes any additional information, and that is given to them usually by their commanders through Army radio.
Let me ask you finally, Paul, it's an interesting relationship because you're with them, they're taking care of you, and obviously providing for your safety. On the other hand, you're providing them some information that they might not otherwise get from the outside, but you have to keep a certain amount of journalistic distance. Can you just comment briefly about your relationship and David's relationship with the troops?
It's been first and foremost a professional one. We are journalists who are here to cover this conflict. And having said that, in the desert, in the arid conditions that they live in, flickers such as ourselves is very, very tough. They are deprived of almost every single, necessity that one can think of, and yet, all right, so. Alex, I need to. I can't tell you why, but I need to go get off the line right now. I do apologize.
Understood. They are on the move with the 3rd Infantry Division. That was our NBC producer, Paul Nasser, who is also with our correspondent, David Bloom. And as you can well understand, they being on the move in the desert, there may be things that they need to take care of. So we're going to wait and we will hear from them once again. But they are part of this huge convoy that has been on the move, what is described as just a very vast and arid desert. It is 1:30 right now. Time to take a check of the latest headlines. British Defense Minister Jeff Hoon says the war in Iraq has not gone to plan, but is working out well nevertheless. No combat casualties, but as many as 8 British soldiers died when a helicopter went down, 4 Americans. British and American troops are advancing through southern Iraq. Meantime, let's take a look at some pictures from the front lines showing some of the 200 Iraqi soldiers surrendering to U.S. Marines. They surrendered about an hour after the Marines crossed the Iraqi border. One group of 40 marched in formation down a 2-lane road to give up. And Turkey's parliament will allow U.S. warplanes to fly over that nation by granting airspace rights. Turkey has made it easier for U.S. heavy bombers to strike Iraq. However, Turkey failed to pass a resolution to allow American ground troops onto Turkish soil. We will recap the latest headlines on the Iraq crisis for you every 15 minutes right here on MSNBC. You can also get the very latest anytime on the web. Go to iraq.msnbc.com for complete coverage. And now we want to take you to northern Iraq. Margaret Sanger is a professor at the University of Cairo. She has expertise in northern Iraq and is an NBC News analyst for that region. Margaret, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Let's talk about the situation in northern Iraq. Of course, Iraqi Kurds have been fighting the Baghdad regime for so many years now. What can you tell us about what the mood might be there today?
The mood actually is jubilant. I've spent a lot of time in this region over the past few years, and I've never seen people quite so lighthearted. There is still a fear, of course, of possible chemical attack, but by and large, people feel that this 30-year struggle that you spoke about is about to come to an end, that they are reaching a point where at least there's light at the end of the tunnel. They may be able now to participate as full citizens in a democratic Iraq, where they're respected as a people and they're treated as first-class citizens, which is what they've been wanting for all this time. They feel that with the U.S. on their side, finally a superpower is there beside them and fighting for the same thing they are.
So there was no doubt in the minds of the Kurds there, Professor Zanger, about who they would side with in the debate that led up to this war, the U.S. or France?
No, there was never any doubt about that. Publicly, the Kurds were afraid to come forward backing the United States because they still feared attack from Iraq, from the government of Iraq. But there was never any doubt. No, they have been absolutely supportive of this war from the very beginning.
Understanding the concerns about chem and bio attacks, the possibility of that are certainly shared by a lot of people, including U.S. troops. Are there other major concerns that they have?
The chemical attack is their biggest fear. I mean, this is something they have experienced. They have experience with many chemical attacks during a genocide campaign in the late 1980s. And this is still in people's mind. This is what forced people to flee in 1991 after the Gulf War uprisings. And it's still quite fresh in people's minds. People have left the cities to a degree and moved to the villages and towns in the north. They are taking some precautions. Other than that, their other fear, of course, is Turkish troops entering this region, and that would be a huge problem, and this is a big concern for people. This is something that the Kurds have made very clear to Turkey that they would not welcome. The U.S. government has made it very clear to Turkey that this would be not welcome and that it could create enormous problems. But Turkey has gone ahead, it seems, they will position troops in this region, and this could lead to serious problems.
Yeah, how concerned are they that Turkey made that announcement?
It's, Turkey's saying it's going in under, it says it's going in for humanitarian assistance. I mean, in fact, Turkey has already created a refugee problem. People have left the cities in the border areas near Dohuk and Zaho and have fled out into the countryside because they fear Turkish troops being here. Now, I think if the Turks stay near the border, if they do come in but stay very close to the border, and I should say that Turkey has been in here for a while. They have several thousand troops that have been inside this area for a while. but are quite contained. If the troops stay near the border and don't start making a move south towards Kirkuk, I think things may stay under control. Certainly the Kurdish governments here, I think, will try to maintain. They will keep their Peshmerga, their fighters, their troops, away from the Turks as much as possible. But if the Turks move towards Kirkuk, this could be a very serious problem.
So it could essentially cause a sort of a small war within a war. That would be the worst case scenario.
It certainly would, and this would be a worst case scenario. You know, the oil fields of Kirkuk are, of course, strategically important for the United States and the coalition forces to secure. It's also a very important place for the Kurds. This has long been a Kurdish city, but it's also long had a large Turkoman population. Turkey may try to lay claim to this area and say that they're trying to protect Turkoman rights, which are ethnic Turkish people who have been in this area. And we could see a rush of Kurds back to Kirkuk. We could see Kurdish Peshmerga get involved in Kirkuk, Turkish forces in Kirkuk. This certainly could be a little mini war in the middle of a war, and I would think something that the U.S. would try to avoid at all cost.
That obviously is important background. Before I let you go, Professor Zanger, we've heard a lot about and seen a lot of Baghdad, talked about the socioeconomic situation there, what the political situation is there. Describe, if you can, in general, the situation where you are and your area of expertise there in northern Iraq.
In terms of the political and
what's
economic
what's everyday
situation?
life for the people there?
You know, I haven't been to South and Central Iraq, so I can't compare it, but what I have seen here in the past few years is an area that is much more prosperous than Central Iraq. The Food for Oil program that was meant to bring humanitarian and emergency assistance to the people of Iraq actually has been functioning here. And the Kurds have been trying very hard, the Kurdish governments have been trying very hard to use this money for development as much as just for emergency aid. People here are not starving. There are a lot of displaced people left from former wars, from this 30-year history of war. So there's a lot of displacement, a lot of housing problems. But the Food for Oil program is actually working. The dinar that the Kurds were using in this area is much stronger, much stronger than the dinar that's been used in the rest of Iraq. There have been a lot of jobs created through the UN programs. People have a lot more freedoms than people in the rest of Iraq can even imagine. There's dozens and dozens of political parties, tons of newspapers, all kinds of publications, independent papers, party papers, unfettered access to the internet, to satellite television. I mean, they have freedoms that people actually in most of the region don't have. So the Kurds are quite well off here, which is one of the reasons why they've been concerned about this. If this war goes badly for them, they could lose what they've managed to gain over the past 12 years. On the other thing, if it goes well, they would feel secure within a national entity, within a state entity that they feel they could be a part of, and in a democratic government system. So they are looking forward to this change.
Margaret Zanger, professor at American University in Cairo and an expert on northern Iraq. We do appreciate your sharing your expertise with us this morning.
Thank you.
Professor Margaret Zanger. Now, Tony Blair, he is awaking this morning to word that 8 British soldiers were killed in the war with Iraq, victims, of course, of that helicopter crash in Kuwait. Let's go to Kiko Itasaka in London for late word on Britain's reaction to this tragedy. Hi, Kiko.
Good morning, Chris. Actually, we do have some breaking news here in London. British Sky TV, and this is the only source reporting this at this point, say that the American B-52s at the RAF Fairford base outside of London have now started up their engines, so it is perhaps a sign that they are about to launch an attack as well. Now, the interesting thing about the B-52s here in England is that, of course, it's a sign of the incredible level of cooperation going on between the two nations. The B-52s based here on British soil, again, we are hearing reports on British Sky TV that they have started up their engines. Now, I also wanted to share with you some of the papers here that are, of course, full of the news of the beginning of the invasion. The Daily Mirror says mass destruction. The Daily Mail taking a different tone, saying invasion, but also adding that the Royal Marines lead the charge into Iraq. The Daily Express saying our boys open fire. The British papers are completely bursting with news of their troops heading in. The very patriotic Daily Express that I just showed you says that Brits lead the invasion and adds that our, quote, our boys spearhead the onslaught. Now, tens of thousands of British troops headed in last night, Royal Marines in Paris, all moving into their goal to seize the strategic southern city of Basra, much also made of the fact that one elite force of 2,000 Marines includes 600 U.S. Marines. This is the first time a British commander has led American troops since World War II. Now, you were talking about Prime Minister Blair, difficult times for him. Last night, he addressed the British nation on television, a call to arms with this message.
Dictators like Saddam, terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, threaten the very existence of such a world. That is why I've asked our troops to go into action tonight. As so often before, on the courage and determination of British men and women serving our country, the fate of many nations rests.
Stirring words from Prime Minister Blair, a call to arms. Back to you, Chris.
Kiko Itasaka in London, and we are continuing to get information there after the loss of 8 British troops in that helicopter accident. Now we want to go to the 3rd Infantry Division because we are able to get our correspondent David Bloom, who is literally on the convoy that has been moving through the desert there. David, it's good to see you. Describe exactly what you're experiencing.
Talking here right now. It's cutting in and out. Let me tell you what's going on here. I'm assuming that you can see and hear me. We're going along with the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division. We're right now in an M88, which is a tank recovery vehicle, which is our means of transportation as we move about on this potential battlefield. Now, you recall that we were with the lead elements of the 3rd Infantry Division, the 315 Infantry of the 2nd Brigade, the Spartan Brigade, as they were the first forces from the 3rd Infantry Division to cross last night into Iraq. Well, now we're in southern Iraq, and the convoy's hooked up. You'll recall that we said that there are 20,000 soldiers in the 3rd Infantry Division. They've got 250 tanks, literally thousands and thousands, 6,000, 7,000 vehicles. There's a huge dust storm that all these vehicles are kicking up, so it's very difficult to see much at all. But essentially what we're doing is we're rumbling along north in the general direction of Baghdad with the 3rd ID. Now, this is the heavily mechanized force, the Iron Fist, they call it, of the U.S. Army. And so as we roll along here, you've got tanks and Bradleys and these M88s, which are the tank recovery vehicles. You've got medics, you've got fuel trucks, you've got an assortment of other vehicles. I want to have my photographer, if he can, pan out toward the left, Craig. Pan out toward about 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock. There you go. What you see right there is an old Iraqi tank from the first Persian Gulf War. What we're in right now is part of the war. Unexploded bombs, including cluster bombs, and a lot of basically leftover military hardware and the wreckage of the previous Gulf War. So it's very important that these vehicles stay on the road because there's unexploded ordnance as we're driving along here. But basically, as Craig just did a 360-degree pan there, you can essentially see that we're just out in the southern Iraqi desert, moving gently north toward Baghdad. Chris, I don't know if you can still hear me or not. I certainly probably cannot hear you.
David, it is Chris. Can you hear me now? David? Obviously, it is very loud out there. David is traveling on a tank recovery vehicle. David, can you hear me at all?
Chris, here's the thing. I can't hear you right now for a second. I'm going to have someone relay to me in my ear what you're asking. So go ahead and ask me something, and someone can relay it to my ear.
All right, David, that's great. I know that some of the troops who were there with you in the 3rd Infantry have been there for many, many months, and you and I talked about the fact that they were anxious to get going. How are they feeling now that they are actually on the move?
Okay, I'm told that what you asked was how are the troops feeling, given the fact that they've been here so long. How they feel is they're enthusiastic about this mission. You'll recall that the elements of the 3rd Infantry Division have been here in Kuwait, of course now in Iraq, for longer than any other forces in the Persian Gulf. Some of the elements of the 3rd ID have been in Kuwait since September or October, going on 6 months now. And
all right, we have lost David Bloom. In fact, it has never stopped striking any of us as extraordinary that we could get him at all. I think we have him back. Let's listen. All right, we have the picture, but we have no audio. Let me explain to you exactly what is going on in case you don't know. David is traveling with Iron Fist. That is the 3rd Infantry Division. Do we have that sound back? No audio. Okay. Part of this huge convoy, and you heard David as he described it, about 250 tanks, 7,000 vehicles. He is with the lead unit. Let's listen.
Their mission was to hit 2 Iraqi posts because what they wanted to do, frankly, was wipe those 2 observation posts.
And there we have lost him again. We're going to try and reestablish that, but obviously they are traveling through very barren, arid desert, and trying to continue to establish that signal is very difficult. But they were given specific orders last night to rest, and then they were brought on the move. Tremendous logistical challenge there in terms of food, water, other supplies, and of course fueling those huge tanks, which get, as you would not be surprised, I don't know, 6-7 miles per gallon, and they have to constantly refuel those with diesel. So we're going to try to reestablish with David. In the meantime, it is 46 minutes after the hour. Let's get a check of the latest headlines. The Associated Press is reporting that about 200 Iraqi soldiers have now given up to U.S. Marines. It happened Friday morning, about an hour after the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit crossed the border. A group of about 40 Iraqis marched in formation down a 2-lane road. There you see it. There is a white flag. Not all of them are military. Some of them are civilians. They were all searched by the Marines. They were told to lay face down on the ground, obviously, just to make sure they didn't have any weapons and didn't pose a threat to the troops. Meantime, U.S. ground forces have seized part of the main road leading from Kuwait into the southern Iraqi city of Basra, suppressing earlier resistance from Iraqi mortars and arms. One Marine infantry unit has apparently had to delay its foray into Iraq after encountering artillery fire and spotting Iraqi tanks. And U.S. intelligence believes Saddam Hussein and maybe even both of his sons were inside the Baghdad compound struck by American missiles Wednesday night. It's not clear if the Iraqi leader was injured or killed. Also, U.S. officials believe that the videotape of Saddam Hussein broadcast after the strike may have been recorded prior to the attack, so it doesn't tell us anything about his condition potentially after. We are going to recap the latest headlines on the Iraq crisis for you every 15 minutes right here on MSNBC. Now, we have been getting some information from British military officials at CENTCOM. We are still waiting for a briefing there in Qatar from U.S. officials. For the very latest from Central Command on the targeted strike. If we can roll on that, please. Anybody is back there. And also the latest on the Marine crash. Let's go to NBC's David Schuster, who joins us now live in Qatar with the very latest. David, hello.
Chris, good morning. Military officials here at U.S. Central Command starting to provide a little more information now on the big picture as far as this war is concerned. We're told that there were some precision strikes again last night in Baghdad, but not the sort of shock and awe, the massive campaign that had been predicted for so many weeks. And in fact, because there have not been any heavy airstrikes and because of the ongoing talks apparently between Iraqi military leaders and U.S. military leaders about a possible capitulation or surrender, that has led to some speculation about the fate of Saddam Hussein, as you have mentioned. Intelligence suggests, and they continue to believe, that Saddam Hussein was in that bunker when he was hit 2 nights ago. That has raised the specter as to whether or not this sort of change in plans with the war reflects that perhaps, as some have suggested, perhaps maybe Saddam Hussein is out of the picture. While that has not been determined, it has not been confirmed whether Saddam is alive, whether he's dead. Military officials here were asked about the fate of Saddam, and a spokesperson for the British forces, Al Lockwood, who is essentially the equivalent of a colonel in the British forces, he said that without Saddam in place, the task, the road to peace for those left behind, becomes much easier. Here's what he had to say to MSNBC earlier this morning.
I think we would hope that somebody would realize that the easiest way to stop this would be then to give up the weapons of mass destruction and then attempt to talk to us about how we're going to bring Iraq back into the civilized world again.
Now, one of the ways that Iraq may get back to the civilized world is by being able to pay for the reconstruction with some of the oil that they could possibly pump out of the country. And to that end, a pretty successful night as far as securing part of that apparatus of Iraq's oil infrastructure. British Royal Marines, backed by U.S. Marines, apparently have taken control of a key pumping station in southern Iraq, which leads directly into the Persian Gulf. There had been some concerns that perhaps this pumping station might be set on fire, or perhaps that Saddam Hussein would essentially open the valves and flood the Persian Gulf with oil as a way of getting rid of it. That apparently did not happen. And again, this key sort of pipeline and infrastructure is in coalition hands. Furthermore, British military officials say that progress is being made on the road towards Basra. Basra, of course, a key southern city in Iraq. It is the second largest city in Iraq. Basra is a place where there is expected to be perhaps some fighting against the coalition. But in recent weeks, military officials had said that Saddam was essentially pulling back some of his key units from Basra, pulling them back to Baghdad, and that perhaps that opened a window of opportunity. And to that end, military planners here at U.S. Central Command are planning to make a big deal, a big spectacle of the fall of Basra, which appears to be likely perhaps in the next couple of days. There are plans to have television crews go to Basra on military helicopters to record the images of what they are hoping will be some jubilation, a celebration there in Basra, with the hopes that that image, that picture, will then break the back, break the resolve of Iraqi soldiers who are trying to decide whether or not they want to continue the fight elsewhere in Baghdad. So a lot of information we are expecting later today. Both the British and the Aussies have indicated that they would like to have a briefing. Logistics are being worked out. There's some talk that perhaps we may see General Tommy Franks today here at the podium behind me. That's still being worked out, but we are expecting more information now to start coming out.
Okay, so, but no official timing yet. They haven't set exactly when that briefing might happen?
Now, the word is that they're still working out what's known are the sensitivities as to who's going to take the podium, in what order, what time. The British and the Aussies are pretty eager to do so, especially the British with that helicopter crash last night, which was actually announced first by the Pentagon, which seemed to ruffle a few feathers here at Central Command, because some of the British military leaders found out from television that some of their own Marines had been killed. That didn't sit very well with some of them. So there are some sensitivities as far as information, how it gets released, but I'm sure that at some point it'll be worked out, and you'll see some briefings later today.
David Schuster at CENTCOM for us in Qatar. We will be getting back with him, and of course, when that briefing happens, we will have it for you live. Originally scheduled for, about 2.5 hours from now, but they're working things out. We'll see when that exactly ends up happening. We want to go now to something that we've been showing you for the last couple of hours, the first really strong video that we have had of Iraqi soldiers who have been surrendering. In all, we have been told around 200 soldiers. Now these are the rank and file soldiers. These are not Republican Guard. Some of them waving white flags, and not everyone who has been surrendering has been military. We also have been told that there were civilians waving white cloths to surrender, and you see the video, they're asked to lie down, then they are checked to make sure that they don't have any weapons on them. But this is exactly what had been planned, what had been worked on. 17 million leaflets had been dropped in recent months, talking about how Iraqis could surrender, to make sure that they were okay, that they would be treated well. And so far, those surrenders have been going just as U.S. and British officials have been expecting. Now, that video that we have been showing you here on American television is also being played on Al Jazeera, which is the major satellite television for the Arab world, but they have been playing this a little bit differently. Anthony Serafin is our translator who sits here. We always have someone 24 hours sitting and listening to what is going on. And tell us what exactly Al Jazeera has been saying about this video.
Well, first they got the video, and then what happened is, you know, they're trying to raise the doubt that those people are really some of the Marine or the military forces belong to Iraq, and they haven't guessed. That's the anchor saying that whether they are a Marine, whether they are a civilian, you know, he's not really focusing on that, and having the guest saying that it could be like kind of a game or kind of a movie. you know, it's a model for how people can surrender and how the soldier treat them good, and how is the enemy, you know, being very nice to his own people who, if he find him in the battlefield, he can kill him. And you see him, you know, he's just checking the person gently, as you see in the pictures. He's like, you know, he's implementing all the UN advices and recommendations.
So let me make sure I understand you, Anthony. The interpretation of the guest on Al Jazeera is that this isn't something that's actually happening in the field, but this is some sort of training film that was made to show the U.S. military how they should treat surrendering military or surrendering civilians under these circumstances. They're saying basically it could be a fake.
Well, Chris, it might sound weary what I'm saying, but recently Al Jazeera is not straight or given a straight comment on things. So you can take these comments as very normal. Those people are not wearing any military suits, and they just, you know, surrendering. They could be just civilian and surrendering. And whatever the excuse me, whatever the American troops are doing, they're just checking civilians, so they don't have to take this kind of precautions and, you know, find out exactly what's going on. You can take it that way, and you can also take it that Americans are kind of making a games or trying to play a psychological role in this kind of war and trying to affect or influence the Iraqi public opinion, and then they got easier war. But one thing which you cannot tell from the comments of both the anchor and the guest, that United States is trying to spare as much as human as they can, because they look at Iraq as human, which I could not feel from the Al Jazeera TV. This is all my impression, Chris.
Yeah, overall, I think both American and British officials, obviously, as devastating as any loss of life is, and so it was certainly not good news when the helicopter went down and 12 people were killed, both British and American. Overall, this war has been going very, very well indeed, according to both British and American officials, and I wonder what the interpretation is on Al Jazeera about overall how this is playing out.
Again, Chris, you cannot accuse them. They are happy for the casualty from the American or the Allied side. You cannot as well say they are sorry for those people who just die because it happens. They are in the battlefield. But one thing, it really, you know, left me kind of impression. The first thing they said that 16 people has died in this helicopter and 12 of them are American. I don't know. I feel like it's you know, it's said with kind of smile, which is could not be seen on the camera, but you can feel it. And
let me ask you finally about another piece of video that we have been seeing so much, and that is the video of Saddam Hussein that was shown after the attack, where U.S. forces believe that he might have been with his two sons, but U.S. now believing that this was taped before the attacks got underway. What are they saying about this videotape on Al Jazeera?
So far is no comment and no proper answer for these questions, which it bothers the American opinion that much. They don't even comment on it, or they do not even re-air those or rerun those. I didn't see him like in 8 hours now. I didn't see him even once.
Anthony Serafin, one of our translators. Thank you, Anthony. They do a great job. They sit there all day, 24 hours listening to Al Jazeera, and we want to continue to give you the perspective so you understand how this is playing out in the Arab world as well, because, of course, in terms of a diplomatic in terms of diplomacy, it's going to be a very important post-war how all of this plays out. In the meantime, of course, President George W. Bush keeping his usual early hours and probably staying up a little later than normal, as he has been getting the regular briefings on the progress of the military action. Jessica Yellen is in our Washington, D.C. bureau with the latest on all of that. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning, Chris. You're right. If today is anything like yesterday, the president is probably up right about now. He started his day yesterday with a briefing around 6 a.m. from his National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, and was in the Oval Office around 7 a.m. He had briefings from Donald Rumsfeld, met with his War Council, and spent a good deal of the day on the phone speaking to world leaders and trying to shore up support, sustain support in the so-called coalition of the willing. Suspects today will have much of the same in it ahead for him. No public event scheduled for the president today, although it is reasonable to expect that he may come before the cameras to make some sort of comment about the loss of life overseas already. Those 16 service people that you mentioned earlier died in that helicopter crash. Perhaps he might make a statement of condolence to their families. And then he's heading off to Camp David. He's going to spend some time there, probably trying to show folks that he's going about business as usual. Chris?
Jessica Yellen in our Washington, D.C. bureau, who is covering the developments out of the White House for us, and the president obviously being kept apprised of all the latest information. Jessica, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We have a lot coming up in our next hour following all the breaking developments, including the latest on the helicopter crash and the U.S. investigation into that videotape. Was it Saddam or wasn't it? Were his sons in that bunker? We're keeping you posted. Dramatic pictures out of Iraq, the first visible signs that the Iraqi military just might not fight for Saddam. Good morning, I'm Chris Jansing. It is 5 a.m. here.